No one can clearly foresee the city of the future, but the appearance of any city, of any period of history, is a direct outcome of the social, economic, and technical conditions then existing.
Hey gang, we're back. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome to the channel if you are new. Thank you so much for all of the support that I got on the eating disorder video that I posted the other day. I will link that video below for you. I had a lot of questions asked to me about how exactly I overcame it, what were the biggest pieces for me. So instead of talking about it myself, because that can just, you know, I'm not the expert in this field, but Julia is. This is Julia Schneider. She is a great friend of mine as well as colleague, and she was working very hard recently on attachment styles and what that means, and how, because your attachment styles really affect every piece of your life, whether it's relationships you're in, or I'll just let you talk about it.
Sounds good. Well, you know, I'm just going to start off by just sharing how I even came to all of this, because I was, well, you and I, we have a similar background in terms of holistic health coaching education, and I was doing everything right. You know, I was eating according to the protocol, I was exercising, I was managing my stress, and then I ended up with adrenal fatigue stage 3. And I was shocked. I was just like so confused about it. And I actually felt really betrayed by my education, because I was like, okay, well, I don't get it. Like, how does this work? Like, so what I started doing, I started researching deeper. Another thing that happened at this, like, kind of sort of at the same time, is that my relationships just kept, you know, guys just were not faithful to me. Like, I had so many relationship challenges that, and again, like, I just couldn't understand why, because, you know, like, I think I'm a nice person, and, you know, and so at the same time as I had the adrenal fatigue, I also broke up with one of my ex-boyfriends, who, he was, like, cheating on me, like, non-stop, and I came to this point, I was like, okay, I need to figure this out, like, this is not how I'm gonna live my life. And as it happens, a book came across, you know, to my attention. It was called Attached, and when I saw that book, I remember that when I was studying early childhood education, which was my first career, when we studied child development, they very briefly mentioned attachment styles. At the time, I didn't pay any attention to it because I didn't care. I was too young. And but then when I saw that book, I was like, oh, there's something here. And I read the book, and everything just became clear to me, because the book was about attachment styles, and it basically talked about how, you know, there's 4 main attachment styles. I mean, there's, you know, many different combinations, but like the main ones. And as I was reading this book, I really understood what was going on. I understood why, even though I was really healthy, or, you know, like I had really healthy lifestyle habits, I still, you know, the anxiety that I was feeling was like feeding a lot of the disharmony in the body, right? And so it became really clear to me how I ended up with adrenal fatigue. I basically burned myself out completely. And at the same time, my relationship started making sense. I mean, I'm going to talk about the attachment styles more in depth shortly, but I realized my attachment style was disorganized. And based on this attachment style, I was also attracted to men who sort of like reenacted everything that was happening to me in my childhood, and I would just like have kind of like, you know, repeat experience of my childhood, and I could totally see how it all stemmed from, I guess, the mental and emotional programming that I received as a child. But not only that, but the nervous system as well. For me, I used to be like a really anxious, like very anxious and sensitive, and very easily kind of like triggered kind of person. And because of that, I just kept looking for things to soothe me. Right? And yeah, so anyways, so that's kind of how it all came about.
Yeah, that, like I mentioned in previous videos, it really does come down a lot to what's going on in your mind when it comes to your physical health. It has a lot to do with how your cells are rebuilding themselves, what's going on with your glands, like adrenal exhaustion. I went through that as well. And then you mentioned about self-soothing. So with overcoming the eating disorder, like I said in that video, I was turning to alcohol. I smoked, I used pot, I used binge eating or restriction to try to ease those emotions. And my attachment style, we figured out, was anxious. So as I did mention in that video and previous ones, I'm very, very anxious. So what would you say about those types of people, the anxious ones?
Anxious, just to kind of help people understand kind of the contrast between all the attachment styles. So I'm just gonna very briefly go over each attachment style, and I want to say ahead of time that it's not as black and white as I'm going to be talking about it, but just like for the purpose of helping the viewers to understand what it is, I'll just kind of make it really separate. So the first attachment style is called secure. So that's the ideal. The way children and adults develop a secure attachment style is that as children, they typically have caregivers who are quite attentive. Now, the good news is that your research actually shows that it needs to be only like 30%. For example, if it's like, if you're a mother, or you don't need to be like stressed about it, that you have to pay attention to your child like 100% of the time, and which is not healthy anyways. Even if you do it for 30%, it's already a good foundation to create a secure attachment style. It's the quality of attention that matters. In secure attachment, children, when they look at their parents, what happens is that they see love coming out of the parent eyes, you know, and for the most part, the parents or the caregivers they're really attuned to what the child needs. So for example, if a child is crying, the parent feels compelled to go and soothe the child. So, you know, some parents are not like that, they actually turn away. And so basically what happens is that the child feels pretty safe and secure growing up, and as a result, their nervous system develops in a very different way. They don't get triggered. My boyfriend is, I would say, like 99% secure. Nothing bothers this man. He's just so stable. Just
that's
like,
fantastic.
You know?
That makes life easy.
It's amazing. And so that's the secure attachment. And so those people could have health issues, but for the most part, the health issues come from just not knowing how to have a healthy lifestyle. So they might have grown up in a family that ate white bread and potatoes and the entire time, so they just developed habits that are not particularly healthy. But in terms of emotional stability, they're strong, and they're very resilient. They recover very fast from any challenges or whatever. So that's kind of the ideal. And then the next one is anxious attachment. So that's what you have, and
a lot of people that I speak to have anxious. I find it's a common one.
It's common, and especially in today's society, it's even more common because people are very distracted with technology. So even like the most well-meaning parents or caregivers, because they're so busy, there's so many demands on us nowadays, it's actually pretty hard to be a parent who creates secure attachment. So that's one of the reasons why so many people have anxious. And so what happens with anxious is that the quality of love might have been really good, but the person might, the parent, the caregiver might have been preoccupied with something. Some people have depression, right? Some people have an illness of some sort. I don't know, like work pressures. They maybe if it's like a single mother, for example, and she actually needs to work and support themselves. So basically, they're not readily available. And what happens is that the child just becomes obsessed, kind of like, it's like they're hyper-focused on their caregiver to figure out how to keep attention on themselves. Because, the natural instinct of a child is that they know, as children, we know that we can survive on our own. And we know that unless someone is actually paying attention to us, bad things could happen. And so the child basically starts to be like totally turned outwardly towards the caregiver and trying to figure out, okay, so it's like a moving target, like how do I keep that focus here? How do I keep the focus on me? And they oftentimes become very disconnected from themselves. And that causes a lot of anxiety, because if you don't know what you need, if you don't know how you're feeling, it feels really unsafe to be in the world, right? And when these people grow up, they end up adapting to whatever the other person needs. It's kind of like, it just becomes this constant focus on figuring out how to keep the person in their life. Because they also, oftentimes they feel very unsure about relationships. It's like they believe that relationships is fragile and that any little thing is gonna like destroy the relationship, and of course that's gonna cause huge anxiety.
Yeah, that's me, because the people that I've dated, you know, the littlest thing happens and to me it's so big and I go over it in my head and I make it huge, and to them it's like, what?
Yeah.
What? They have no idea. What do you mean? And I'm like, oh no, it's all coming to an end.
Yeah. And because of that, people also develop a lot of self-soothing mechanism. Because again, like if you're constantly anxious, it's really hard on the body. So, eating disorders, smoking, alcohol. Some people become workaholics. Some people become just like party all the time, like non-stop. So just like trying to kind of avoid that.
Or the gym, 24/7, being in the gym. That was me too.
So that's that. Now, then another one is called avoidant attachment. And what happens in childhood that causes to develop that attachment is that the caregiver is basically not available, like emotionally especially. And so anytime the child, you know, like, because babies actually have you seen babies, right? Like,
yeah.
Right? Like they're just like, they send out signals for attachment. Like you can't pass by a baby. You just like want to peek. Right?
Yeah.
And it's all, you know, it's all planned. It's like instinctual. And so what happens is like the baby kind of like sends out the signal for attachment, but if the caregiver just either doesn't care, or again, they might be really preoccupied with something, but to the degree, like much more than the anxious. So what happens is that the baby or the child, connection becomes so unsatisfying for them that they just say, you know what, forget it. Like, I don't need anybody. I'll survive on my own. Like everybody, like I'll be independent. I'll take care of my own needs. I don't need anybody. And at the same time, they also shut down emotionally. So when they grow up and they enter adult relationships, it's really hard for them to have emotional intimacy. And oftentimes, so there's, I would say, like two scenarios typically that happens. So it's either that they become either serial monogamists, meaning that it's like 2 years, or like really short kind of relationships, because you know, relationships typically deepen at the 2-year mark.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
That's when you start going, whoop.
Yeah.
And that's when they're like, I'm out of here. Like, I cannot handle this. And the other thing that could happen is that they become unfaithful. Like, they just start having affairs just so that they don't have to deal with this huge tension of emotional intimacy. What I want to say here is that it's almost like this cruel joke. So anxious people very often attract avoidant people.
Oh my gosh.
And it becomes like, right? Because you know, the first 3 months it's typically like, you know, because it's like, oh yeah, I finally found the one, right? And then what happens typically is the avoidant is like, this could actually lead to something intimate, and they start pulling away.
Yeah.
And the anxious person is like, oh my god. Yeah. Right? And anyways, so that's how it, you know, oftentimes happens. But the good news, it doesn't have to be like that. Like,
true.
It doesn't have to be like
if you're identifying with any of this, we're not saying like, oh, that's your situation, it must suck. We're saying there's definite ways to get through this. I had no idea what my attachment style was at all. I didn't even know about attachment styles or anything to do with that. And I had what's called a discovery call with Julia, and it changed my life. Absolutely changed my life. And so I will link your information below. If people do want to jump on a discovery call with Julia, you can find the info below, because it is life-changing.
Yeah, I would be very, very happy to talk about it. It's like
It's
amazing. It's like it's life changing. It's like for real. It's not just like a word it's like for real. It will change people's life.
That's incredible.
Definitely changed mine. So anyway, and I wanna so the last attachment style, and that's a very complex attachment style, and oftentimes therapy is required as well, like you and it's called disorganized attachment. And what happens is that so a baby has an instinct to attach, right? And at the same time a baby has an instinct to protect themselves. And in that kind of environment, if a person developed that, what happens is that the caregiver is not safe in some way. So for example, it could be, let's say a father who gets like really triggered and they just like start yelling, right? They might love their child. It doesn't mean that there's no love there, but they're just not able to manage their emotions properly. So what happens is that so the child kind of sees for example, the father, and they're like, oh my God, daddy, and they start wanting to attach. And at the same time, because they see the anger, it's like there's a trigger response. Okay, I need to protect myself.
Yeah.
And so they go back, and it ends up being kind of you have one foot on the gas pedal and one foot on the brake at the same time. So you just freeze.
Yeah.
And when people grow up with that attachment style, you can imagine, right? If your body is frozen, then the organs are not able to function properly, and a lot of health issues get developed. And especially, I would say, definitely adrenal fatigue, and also digestive issues. So our brainstem, that's where all the instinct is, right? And if this part is overstimulated all the time, the brainstem, we have nerves come out and they go into the organs. And so if this part of the brain keeps sending signal danger, 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 the body shuts down digestion, right? Because you don't need to digest anything if you're running away from a tiger,
right?
Right. And if you have that for your throughout your life, people go to doctors and practitioners, massage, but it never helps, because the impulse,
the problem is the root cause.
That's the root cause, and it might help for an hour, it might help for a day, but unless you reprogram that, unless you heal your nervous system and its digestion will just be compromised the entire time.
And I've seen people go into, in Canada we have Shoppers Drug Mart, in the States CVS, Walgreens, whatever, just getting laxatives or getting whatever to try to help the symptoms, and the symptoms are caused by your past, essentially, in this case. So I'm going to also link below the video I did on what holistic health means, because it means characterizing all parts of something as a whole. So if you're going to a holistic practitioner, you're getting this kind of treatment as well as just the physical symptoms. I do want to also say we're going to have a part 2 of this video on how to rewrite your memories, which is fascinating, because you can actually reprogram your memories and how they're sitting with you and how they're affecting your life today and your life in the future. So is there any closing thing you want to say about attachment styles, or how people can...
Yeah. So I want to leave people with hope.
Yes! All is not lost.
It's not lost at all. All of those attachment styles can be healed. So our body, we are programmed, the secure attachment comes factory installed. It's not it went somewhere. It's not, no matter what kind of childhood you had, or sometimes people actually have pretty good childhood, but they might have some sort of an accident or some sort of one-time event that totally throw them off. But the good news is that it's all can be shifted back to secure. One key that I want to point out is that nowadays, luckily, there's a lot of information about attachment and how to heal it, but it needs to be done in a relationship to someone, because attachment wounds happen in relationships, and you need to heal it in relationships, because in order to heal, it's important to be around a person who exhibits secure attachment, because just being in their presence, that already starts to reprogram the nervous system. There doesn't even need to be any coaching or therapy.
Wow, yeah.
But then once that starts to happen, it's important to start learning new ways of showing up in relationships. So For example, for me, my attachment style used to be disorganized. I'm about 90% more secure now.
Yay!
Feels amazing. But what I used to do is that, okay, so for example, if someone would say something that triggered me, my response would be like, I'm getting into this tank and I'm just like gonna blow everybody up.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And in the past it used to cause me a lot of trouble because people get scared when they see something like that.
Yeah.
So for me, one of my practices is to be around people, and when I get triggered, because you know in the beginning as you just start to heal, of course it happens frequently.
You start noticing the triggers a lot more. Yeah.
And I would I would like notice it, and then I would do like a process that I teach in my program, and I would kind of like settle myself down on the inside, and then I would sort of like reconnect with the person again. So instead of like just like leaving the room or like blowing things up, I started practicing. Okay, I feel triggered now, but I don't want to blow this relationship up because it's important to me. And I just very gradually started to like shift the way I show up in the relationships, and as a result my relationships change. So it's kind of like a cycle like that. So yeah, so I guess
that's amazing.
And producing's worst nightmare. For some strange reason, the camera stopped recording. The battery was good. I don't know what happened, but thankfully we were at the end of the conversation at that point. Please do see the description box below for all of Julia's information. Please contact her for a discovery call. It is life-changing. If you thought this video was helpful, informative, entertaining at all, please give it a thumbs up for me. Please subscribe to the channel. I swear this will not happen again. Subscribing really is where the support does come from. Please share the channel around. The info in this channel can heal more than 90% of any health, wellness, and body image challenge for free. And please hit that little bell icon if you would like a notification of the next time I post a video. Until next time, thank you so much for your understanding. Be sure to tune in for the next video on how to rewrite your memories. And until then, I'll see you then. Bye.